Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Matthew Gilbury. I'm Commercial Director at Yoti, and thank you for joining us for the first in our webinar discussion panel series. And today we're focusing on technology trends and strategy in the property sector. And I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Gary Barker, Chief Technology Officer at Connells Group. Good morning, Gary.
Morning. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Andrew Stanton, who's a prop tech influencer extraordinaire. Good morning, Andrew.
Extraordinaire. Morning, everyone.
And our very own Robin Toombs, CEO of Yoti. Good morning, Robin.
Morning, Matt. Very nice to meet you all.
Brilliant. So the format of the next 42 minutes or so will be an open panel discussion focusing on some of the key technology trends within the property sector. And I really look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts and views. We will also allow time at the end for Q&A. So please, as the session goes on, stick your questions in the Q&A section in the bottom, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So I guess without further ado, let's get into it. So first question, and I think really, addressing the elephant in the room is COVID. We know that across the world, it's significantly affected the way we work. So my first question is, how has the property market been impacted, and what part has technology aided you during this time? So I'll direct this first question over to Gary, and then Andrew and Robin, if you want to chime in.
Lucky Gary.
I get the easy one then. So I mean, look, and it's funny actually, because when I looked at this, I was going back to kind of some of my old days, kind of implementing CRM, and you kind of look at it and go, it was, you kind of had to sell the solution in there, and it used to take about 6 months to implement the technology. And, I've implemented, I was, within my new role, I've been able to implement a number of technologies, but a lot faster. So it's like all of a sudden, not just the demand for technology has increased, but how people create the technology has increased and how they adopt it. I mean, all of a sudden it's like, wow, we want to get this in there. We've got to do it. And I think that's what I've certainly seen, the much more of acceptance, and actually the public's acceptance with doing it as well. I mean, when you look at some of the stats that I've got visibility of in terms of kind of digital open houses, digital floor plans, 360 views, digital sign-offs in terms of AML, money laundering, digital terms of references, and you start looking at it and you go, actually, the public's accepted this. They've accepted that, technology is something that we can actually adopt and we can grow with. And as a result, that word prop tech that we all sit and live and breathe actually finally is coming to fruition. So I think we're in a place at the moment where COVID, there's been a lot of negatives about it. When you take the socio-economic factors into consideration and you look at the market itself, people have taken the opportunity to really rethink their lives. I mean, we've looked at the London exodus and where the house people have moved. But when you look at it from a technology standpoint, I was talking to people like Ben Quiney over Audio Agent, and he was kind of showing me kind of a lot of their video tour functionality and how that was embedded, and actually the adoption of video tours, the 360s, and it's overwhelming. And then on top of that, let's not forget that people are now taking advantage of things like customer portals, marketing platforms to actually communicate on a much more regular, much more frequent basis, because actually gone are those times when you'd walk into the office and it does happen. I mean, having been and talked to a lot of the teams within Connells and Countrywide now, that office relationship actually is still hugely important in a property sale transaction. But actually, we're now seeing digital communications beginning to take over, and actually portals, my account functionality really taking over and driving that forward. So, not one answer there, I'm afraid, for you, but probably a lot of things. The overriding piece being that the adoption of technology has become far easier because the public want it. The public are demanding it because they want to transact. And the only way they can do it is by using more technology. So I think it's been a good thing all round.
Brilliant. No, great answer. Thank you. Andrew, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's quite easy. Everything Gary said.
Gary, and it's everything the same thing that Gary said. Is that what it was, Andrew?
I'm feeling sorry for Robin, because by the time we get to Robin, it'll be like, what can he say? So I'd sum it up. Pre-COVID, I'm just talking about residential agency, it was agents, CRMs, and property portals. That was it. And WhatsApp, because loads of agents do stuff on WhatsApp. That's about it. Post COVID, which is where we are now, we've got all this stuff happening, all these terms that people have never heard of, but are very regular, you know, like big data, Internet of Things, virtual reality, augmented reality, shared economy. They're all kind of big things that are pushing through. But, you know, video conferencing, for instance, 12% of people using video conferencing, 68% of agents are using that by the end of the first lockdown. And if you look at the fact that for 4 months of last year, everyone was locked down, we had doors shut for agencies, and the doors that were kind of open, it was on an occasion, and yet still record amounts of business were done, both lettings and sales. And agents suddenly realised, I mean, I had hundreds of owners ringing me going, what am I going to do? And I said, well, you're just going to run your business from home. And they go, how do we do that? And, you know, for lots of agents, that was a bit of a problem. And now they're going, okay, this is pretty good. So I think your question was also, how has technology aided people? Mm-hmm. You know, virtual viewings. Do you know that 16% of all properties let last year, and this is a true figure, I haven't made this one up, were from tenants who never actually viewed the property. Wow. So not only did they, you know, right, we're going to have it, but they then signed a contract, 16%. So, you know, and 70% of investment buyers, you know, buy-to-let people, bought properties without physically seeing them also. How are they doing that? Well, you know, our senses now are coming out of our armchairs, and, you know, software's allowing us to be everywhere and know everything. So, yeah, I mean, and with regard to, I've been banging on about PropTech since 2017, and my dog has sort of said, is anyone ever going to catch on to the fact that all it is software allowing people to make money faster? You know, it's not a barrier. It's like, don't do it with a biro on a bit of paper. Use software, and you can do it. You can scale up and do things more quickly, more efficiently. You know, and you know, so yeah, it's exciting times, and it means I've got a job for another couple of years anyway. So. Growing sector.
Absolutely. No, definitely.
I think the thing for me, Matt, is, you know, I was very worried on the 16th of March, you know, sending 300 people home and hoping that our business would continue to run. You know, I had a very sleepless night, and I particularly worried that, you know, the whole process would slow down. I thought people would be able to do phone calls and Slack and, you know, a bit of video calling. But I thought, what about our business clients? Are we going to be able to win new business? Are we going to be able to explain ourselves? You know, and actually, after a couple of months, I realized when you've got that kind of shock, people adapt. And, you know, we used to kind of have a chat with somebody and, you know, you'd arrange to do a meeting, and of course somebody's busy. So the meeting wouldn't happen for 2 weeks if it was face to face. And then the next meeting might be another 2 weeks. And therefore it's 4 weeks before you've had your first couple of meetings. Whereas actually now video calls and whatever, you're doing 2 meetings in a week. And the whole process actually has sped up a bit, which is good. And I think, you know, even in the property sector, as you say, video viewings, you know, not potentially even having to see the place physically before you make a transaction, e-sign it. Some of that stuff is going to mean actually it's more efficient, lower cost, and easier to transact with customers and get the job done and make some money.
Brilliant. Great answers. Thank you very much. And that probably leads quite nicely into my next question, which is around, you know, the fact that buying or renting a property of any size is a very complex and time-consuming process. I think we'll all agree. So speeding this up can have a significant impact. So this question is really around driving efficiency. So can you give examples of how you're making efficiencies within your business and how technology is aiding this? And I'll start with Andrew on that one.
Okay, all right. And this isn't a plug for Yoti, but in a way it kind of is. So James Lancaster, really great guy from Yoti, contacted me and said, oh, this is what Yoti do. I said, great. And then he showed me what they did, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant. And then I said, oh, can I have a go? Because obviously, you know, digital signatures, I have contracts, NDA, stuff like that. And it took him about 1.5 minutes to set it up. And what I find a lot of is people building out technology, and it's 17 keystrokes. What I love is technology is kind of press a button and it's done forever. And there's more of this technology coming. When we buy goods and services now, you know, we don't want to log in and tell people who we are. We want a kind of seamless, you know who I am. Come on, telephone, you know, your mobile, look at me, face recognition, we're in, we're done. That is how the world is moving on. And I think, you know, when we buy and sell property now, everyone's touched on it already. Digital natives, we talk about this a lot. Do you know the average age of an estate agent is 23? So in the actual residential agency, they're all digital natives, but they've got old people like me who sit and go, I don't really understand it. I'm a bit frightened of it. But I've got to say, in a minute and a half, you can be an adopter of a new technology that's going to help you. Yes, there's a cost, but there's a cost also not to adopting stuff. So, you know, yeah, buying and renting a property, there are loads and loads of procedures. Let's cut them down. Let software do it in the background for us. It's more efficient, it's safer, and you can make more money. I'd always say, you know, all this stuff is about making more money, not selling goods to you and services. It's actually your business can be quicker, more agile. Because the big thing is, every year, 1.1 million properties get exchanged. There's more and more agents. So we're getting this, what they call digital Darwinism. If your agency or your operation is not the sleekest and got the best tech, then what happens is your market share will go down, because, you know, tech is driving everything. And the last thing I'd like to say is, people seem to think that in some way property is sacred and it's built upon paper and all the rest of it. But we know the rest of our life is all about software, isn't it? You buy stuff, you sell stuff. You want a pair of shoes. Buying a house is like buying a pair of shoes. It's just, you know, it could be that quick if everybody was, if it was all joined up. I think the problem is this. Someone said to me the other day, it's a bit like you get on a bullet train, and then when you want to do conveyancing, you get off the bullet train and you get on a bicycle, only there's a puncture and you're not allowed to use the bicycle because it's chained up and you can't use it at the weekend. You know, property is done 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Conveyancing is done Monday to Friday, but, you know, not at lunchtime. I'm not having to go to the legal sector. I'm just saying it's a reality. We should all be doing it all the time together in a joined up way. And until that happens, and, you know, that's legacy systems. That's something else, isn't it?
And probably because you've got different people, different, you know, kind of vested interest from
stakeholders. Don't even get there. I mean, I think all the solutions in the world are here already. We just need to have a big arm wrestling game and see who's victorious and say, well, we'll do it this way. But we'll get onto that later. Yeah, stakeholders. Everything's being held back because a lot of vested interest, millions of pounds. People have got great businesses making a lot of money. Those businesses will get wiped out overnight if all of a sudden we start doing things differently. But
I think Andrew, you know, Gary hit it on the head. That a lot of tenants, I think, will look and think, well, you know, I can do this remotely. And I think what we'll see is, I think a lot of tenants will think, I can get myself, you know, a rental passport. I can pre-verify myself. I can go into open banking and prove that I've made rental payments, that I've got a good salary. Yeah. You know, I can then do a digital ID. Yeah. And effectively, I'm going to turn up at the estate agents with, hey, I'm a pretty good bet as a tenant, and, you know, I'm letting 15 of you know that I'd like to look at properties, and actually you're not going to waste your time taking me around as a viewer, because you can kind of see that I'm pre-verified, and therefore, you know, the whole thing becomes more efficient. I need to beat other people to that property. I'm going to prepare myself better to effectively be first in the queue. That's great news for independent agents. Rather than doing lots and lots of administration and possibly wasted visits, you're going to have a better qualified set of people. You know, not everyone, but the ones who aren't doing this will later go, I'm losing out. I'm not being offered viewings. Why is that? Oh, it's because I'm not well prepared. And those people will effectively get the viewings. You'll finish the referencing because 90% of that's been pre-verified. And as Gary says, you know, if you keep that consumer happy, you know, those tenants are going to keep on coming back because they think, I've now sorted out digital ID, I can e-sign. That's good for everyone in the industry. Quicker to market, cheaper costs, less waste, faster transactions. And I think even in the sales sector as well, things like PG81, they're going to make it easier for people to basically do some of the grunt work up front and reduce the hassle of how long often these transactions take.
Fantastic.
I mean, I'm going to chip in now because and then Andrew, I'll disagree with some of the things you said, only because it's, I would anyway. I think buying and selling in the house is still the most important thing that people will do in their lives. When you think about it, it's the biggest asset you're ever going to own. And it's an emotional purchase. I get your point about buying a pair of shoes. I never get too emotional about my shoes. For those of people who know me, I'm a bit of a scruffy one anyway, so it's not really a problem. But my house is my castle. That phraseology sits really interesting. So for me, I think people really do think, they get emotionally attached about it. They think about it. And I think that's where the role of the agent adds massive value as well. It's still a massive people exercise. It's still a people business. I'm a huge fan of lots of different types of agency. I think somebody commented in there, what do we think is going to happen to personal agents and kind of online agents? They'll find their place. There's a market share that has, we've seen it with the likes of, all of the online businesses. It's kind of morphed and shaped. The market share dynamics have pretty much fit around 5%. It got to about 5% of the market. It's moving a bit between the different people. We've seen personal agent models come across that have actually fitted in quite well. But fundamentally, agency is about people. The technology is a supporter and an enabler and a value added of it. So I get your point, Andrew, around efficiency.
I totally agree. I was an agent for 32 years. I marketed 18,000 properties. I like to think I sold lots of properties to the wrong people because I was being paid by somebody else to do so. I mean, that's the job, isn't it? You've got a terrible house, terrible area, too much money, you sell it, you're the best salesman in the world. But what I would say is this: at the point they want to buy it, that's where it should be a pair of shoes. It shouldn't be 17 weeks. It shouldn't be 23 weeks, which is why, like Yorkies, I knew them a couple of years ago, and, Dan Makin, Ricardo Inucci-Dawson, Craig Massey, all of a sudden they said, why does it take us 17 weeks to buy a pair of shoes? It's a known process. And if you think about it, 1.1 million properties get sold every year. So that's 1.4. All that conveyancing is done. All that knowledge about how we buy property is very well known, very well documented. And we know that on software, we can say, right, this is everything that could possibly go wrong, go right. The title deed's been lost. We've got to deduce the epitome of title. Anything. All these things can be mapped out, and we say, okay. But we don't. We open a file in a bit of cardboard, open a file if we're lucky, and off we go with some PDFs. And it's all locked down, it's all siloed, and it's all terrible. But the consumer's just going, okay, I've seen the great agent. They've shown me 12 properties. I love Gary Barker. He's a great agent. He's shown me everything that's out there. And I'm going to buy through him because actually I like him. I'm going to buy this house, not that house, which does happen. Personality selling. But the point they want to buy it, and then it all goes flat. Because then we're off the speeding bullet train, and we're getting on the bicycle that's chained up to the lamppost, which with a puncture, and everyone's a bit deflated, and that's when it all goes the wrong way.
So
I'm gonna, you know what, that is where the value from technology drives, isn't it? Yeah. And that's where the technology takes over. The minute that there is a transaction to be had and services to be had, because at the end of the day, and like you, when I looked at a lot of the stats around this, and take a tenancy agreement, average tenancy signature is currently 2.6. So we want 2.6 people who are part of that process. Typically, pre-COVID, pre-digital signing, and I shouldn't say, there's a key area here, which is pre that we didn't have anything else. How many agents in the UK? How many agents in the UK had no alternative but to actually send that document out? And we, we did a lot of analysis previous in my prior life around the length of time it takes to actually get a tenancy. And I had a fantastic superstar, Matt Goddard, who just, he analysed to the nth degree what was going on inside the business, and actually evidence that, things like e-signing make a massive difference. And I absolutely can share it because I go know the data around it, but 72% of envelopes for lettings was signed within the first 48 hours. 72%. Back to the days when it was kind of, wait 3 weeks. That's what Matt's analysis was kind of highlighting. 3 weeks to actually get a tenancy signed compared to 72% of people signing up within 48 hours. And that is that's the rental signing. So I think, the rental bit, the AML, the onboarding, the AML checks, the tenancy signing off, all of these bits that were prerequisites, the direct debit mandate, all of a sudden you're in this world where, as you say, 24, 48 hours, it's a transaction. The bit that, you've made the emotional attraction, haven't you? You want to rent that house, you want to get in there. Here's the actual transaction dealt with. Sales, that's where the challenge comes from. And you know what? I think the challenge about sales isn't, and I get what you say about conveyancers, and I am going to really defend them now a bit, because I'll tell you what, some of the best people I've met in this industry are conveyancers. I mean, I have the pleasure of, obviously, Countrywide Connells having 2 big conveyancing groups, and my God, I have never seen a team of people work so goddamn hard over, the last few months to deliver people's dreams, their homes, their dreams. And the problem they've got is their hands are tied, aren't they? They don't have the technology. They want to drive technology. They want to do things electronically. They want to automate. But the problem is that the process itself of just buying and selling a house is just fundamentally flawed at the moment from a technology perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's solutions coming along that will hopefully, I was lucky enough to sit as part of the My Home selling group, and we were trying to kind of digitize a bit more, dare I say, the old word kind of all those years ago, kind of home information packs. But fundamentally, a digital transaction, people like, there's blockchain technology, I should probably call them out, Coadute, there's a lot of areas where people are trying to make a difference. The other thing as well is certain processes within a estate agency, within lettings, add no real value whatsoever. And for me, one of the big things is automation. And that is not just about software, that is proper, what I call robotic automation. And I know, and I can tell you this story because and my team who work with me will, they'll mug me off about this later on because they know this is a true story. I sat on an automate. I have a fantastic automation team, unbelievably talented, and they build automation solutions, just moving things, moving that what adds no value from a people perspective, but the automation. And I sat on the first call, and throughout the call, I was asking a lot of questions about what processes, what we did, how we did it, blah blah. And I won't need to go into those details, the secret sauce, but at one point they kept talking about this Kingsley, and they're going, Kingsley, Kingsley does this and Kingsley will do this. And I'm thinking, for an automation process, this bloody Kingsley person, he does a hell of a lot, doesn't he? And that is our robot. We've given him a name called Kingsley. And I look a right idiot when I say, well, who is this Kingsley guy? And he was like, he's the robot. But that automation, that's where value gets added. There's no value in doing certain things within the property process, Automation, massive play for me. And that's where technology, workflow, automation, task planning, activity planning, you wrap that up together, and then the process of buying and selling a house can be simplified, but we still need the legal bit. So the conveyancers need the help. They would love to do it. I mean, I'd love to implement systems that automated this, but they're just not there at the moment. And they need that help. I mean, Christ, Peter Ambrose, the team we've had, that they all tried to kind of do this, but it is fundamentally a real challenge. And my dream, and one of the things I'm clearly want to do as a CTO within the Connells Group, is to really try and improve that and bring systems and processes and automation together that really help that. Because, oh my God, the conveyancers care so much, and they take it so personally when they can't deliver on somebody's dream. I've never known a team work so hard as the teams we have on board at the moment, and actually a big shout out to all conveyancers who worked their little socks off over the last few months to deliver those dreams to people. And
I've just gone through a process of buying a house and selling a house, and I think one of the things that I identified was that conveyancers are fantastic, but they are restricted by waiting for other elements in the process to happen. So a lot of it is around the government side and waiting for searches to come in from the councils, and the councils being overworked, and waiting for processes. And one of the things we've seen with Yoti is HM Land Registry are starting, because of COVID and what's happened over the last year, to realise that they've got to digitise that. So the approval to do electronic witnessing of documents is one of the newest things that we've seen come out of the government in a long time, which is really hopefully helping the process. I guess a kind of a follow-on question is, do you think that is it technology, or is it government, or what is it that we really need to make changes or push for? Can business affect how government work, and how do we kind of streamline that more? Because I think the technology can really enable that.
I thought, Matt, it's interesting that, Oliver Dowden, I think it was a couple of days ago, was saying that the regulatory approach has to change. Yeah, you have to follow science more. You have to be pro-innovation. It's got to be effective regulation, but you've got to actually be dynamic about assessing that. So, it's good that land registries issued PG81. They're following JMLSG. Effectively, you can rely on an IDV, a remote ID verification. You can rely, in the finance sector now, on a chip-read passport as a single source of identity verification, and you can actually rely on a digital ID. So that sector has basically looked at the science and listened to the sector and said, look, we're going to make the change. I think land registry making that PG81 is a first critical change, but actually the government's going to have to look at right to work. It's going to have to look at particularly right to rent and say there isn't actually evidence that looking at the document for a few seconds and then taking a photocopy and not having any machinery or expertise to spot a really good fake is adding any value. As Gary said, if it's not adding value, you've got to look at, well, is there an alternative which is either better or at least as good and effectively is cheaper, more effective, easier for the businesses, easier for the consumers? And I think, quite a lot of these mundane things, checking AML, checking ID, you can do that remotely now. Those regulations are going to have to change, because then all of the agents can effectively take advantage of, I'm good at selling, I'm good at basically being with the customer, but I'm a small independent and I'm not an AML expert. I'm not an expert on checking documents. I would like that to be done by somebody who knows how to do that and to pay a small fee for that and speed up the whole transaction through that. And I think even the conveyancers will find that that's a very efficient way of doing it. So I think the regs have got to change over the next few years.
Could I just interject? It arcs back to what Gary said, and it's just what you said, Robin. Andy Wallace, who first got me into agency, I think in 1985, he said, what you've got to realise is a state agency is a cottage industry, but it's on a national basis. And that also is true for conveyancing. So in conveyancing, I deal with some of the top companies, they've got, some of them are not a huge amount. I think about 82% of estate agents are independent. So they've got like one office or two. So they run it as a sort of, in America, they call it mum and dad sort of company. And that's your problem. And also the conveyancers. I mean, I love conveyancers, I've got to say. I always used to say, selling the property was easy. That's 14 hours. 60 hours is the tail end, getting it through. And I was forever in my heyday on the phone, talking to agents, talking to agents, but talking to solicitors. And not saying, oh, have you had this in? Have you had that in? I'll say, what haven't you had in? Right, I'll get it for you. I'll resolve it. Knowing that, their job is very difficult, because they've got a process, and until they've got things in front of them, they're doing nothing. But as a solicitor said to me the other day, what you've got to realise, Andrew, is we don't do it for anybody but the lender, and also we're blind. We've not been to the property, so our eyes and ears are these bits of paper. And I'm going, so we might get to the day then when you can actually virtually go around the property, where all the documentation is in one vault. And I said, actually, you'd be able to walk around that property with the other solicitor and say, oh, the board has been moved. Oh, that's been done. Oh, that back fence has moved 10 foot. What do we think about that? Are we going to indemnity? Are we going to have a fence certificate? Okay, we're going to walk around. We're happy. So we could all go full circle with drones as well. I mean, there's so many things, because I just think it's all going to get forensic. It's just going to be whatever you buy, sell, you're going to know about it in so many data sets. And that's not so far away, because now I think the buyer's going, well, I do this, in my job in the city, I'm doing this. Why aren't you guys doing it? I used to have this, I can remember in 1987 going to a property and a bloke in a Mercedes going, should we use the phone? And I'm going, what phone? And he got this great big brick that he had in the middle of the car. And he's going, where have you got one? And I said, no, I've got a Fiat Uno up there. I said, it hasn't got a phone. And I had to apologise, to this guy. And this is what's happening, in their daily lives, they're using all this stuff and we're not. But I do think it's a culture thing also, because as Robin said, if you've got one office, you're running it, you're doing your lettings and all the rest of it, have you got time to research anything? That's the thing. And that's why people come to me and they sort of say, well, what solutions are out there? And I try and be agnostic. And I sort of say, we've got 10 offices, 20 offices or whatever. because it changes daily. I mean, it's so complex, isn't it, Gary? The technology is moving so quickly. Names of companies change overnight. Like, oh, they've merged with them. Oh, what do they do now? It's crazy. It's speeding, isn't it? It's you know, exciting, but a bit baffling as well. You know, it's
unbelievable. I mean, it would be hard of me not to say it, but clearly, with in my prior role at Repeat, I mean, Jesus Christ, we were having to integrate with hundreds of different companies, and you know what? There was never you could never get it right, and in essence, the only way that's been dealt with, I think, you know, why was Foundations ever dreamed up? You know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was a dream child. And the reason why it was dreamt up was because of so much wealth of kind of prop tech coming along that intermingled with the individual processes. You needed, if you're running a CRM, ERP kind of platform, you need a way that the different type of agent, customer, consumer could actually use the technology in the right way that they had. So it needed to be plugged in. And I think that was why it had to happen. You know, it was always evident it was going to change. I mean, technology has changed. You know, I like your analogy to the mobile phone, you know, and nowadays, I think somebody commented, you know, iPhones and things like that. I mean, you can, geez, you know, I can do so much from a phone now. I mean, I've seen agents list houses solidly on a mobile phone now. The tech is there, but why wouldn't you? I mean, I've got the newer iPhones have got higher quality. You know, do you remember? You will remember this from our kind of Countrywide days and Connells. You know, the digital cameras when they first came out, and you know they were 3 megapixels. Yeah, didn't know these are amazing. I mean, Jesus Christ, nowadays, I've got an iPhone now that, you know, is the same thing as my old digital SLR. I mean, and actually it can do the 360, it can do the walk arounds, it can do virtual. And at the same time, it can list it. I can do the actual electronic signature. I can do the AML check. I mean, all on my phone. And so, you know, it is a different shaping desire.
People say it's unsafe, and this is what I can't get my brain around, because lenders and solicitors say we like the facts. Now, the facts was designed in 1839, not 1916. You know, 1839 it came out, and I think, well, that's just a document that is sent through a telephone line. That's easy to falsify, because all you got to do is put it on a flatbed and scan it in. It could be anything, whereas, you know, other things can't be tampered with. And you talked about code, you talked about blockchain. I mean, that's kind of perhaps where we're going to go, to this kind of, you know, Rubik's Cube, there's a square, it can't be, you know, everyone knows where it is, it can't be changed, can't be manipulated. Because 90% of fraud in legal sector is in conveyancing. You know, what a surprise. Documents floating around that we can muck about with, you know, people who are criminally minded. It shouldn't be like that. And why shouldn't it? You know, why shouldn't why shouldn't your mobile phone? I keep calling it a telephone. I've got a client with a telephone, it throws me. But why shouldn't we be able to do it all from our mobile? Because we are going to do it all from our mobile, and we trust our mobile. But it's just the systems that are in it. They are, you know, that's the key point, isn't it?
Sorry to cut in, Andrew. I think we've got a lot of on this topic, but I'm conscious of time and wanting to cover some of the other topics, if you don't mind. So should we jump to the next question, if that's okay? Cool, thank you. So
it's an easy one. That's fine. Yeah.
We'll try to get through it. And we got
lunchtime. Is it lunchtime?
I've also seen some fantastic questions in the Q&A that we'll try and cover as well. So the next topic I wanted to discuss, we've touched on a bit actually, is security and compliance. So we know that regulation and governance is becoming ever more important in the property sector, especially with so many stakeholders. Again, we've touched on it throughout the conversation so far. You know, lenders, lawyers or conveyancers, agents, sellers and buyers. So things like identity verification, KYC, know your customer, and AML, anti-money laundering checks, for example, are all involved. And we've touched on it throughout, but just wanted to get everyone's thoughts a bit more around how you're tackling it within kind of your sphere of influence. And Robin, how about come to you for this one?
Yeah, you know, I've said a bit about it, so I'm not going to say much more, but I think it's really important that in the property sector, you keep engaging with the regulators, with the government, because, you know, we found that we've had to really actually kind of get in the room with them in the FCA kind of sector and say, you know, a liveness test on a phone, to the, you know, the US NIST level 2 standard is way better than anything else you could do. If I put something in a web form and claim that I'm Gary Barker, yeah, as long as I know a bit about Gary Barker, you know, the business is going to go, great, Gary Barker's just signed up. It's not true. Yeah, but you've got to kind of push the regulator and make sure they don't think, well, the existing thing kind of works and therefore we're going to stick with that. You know, a lot of the time the regulator is pretty, you know, risk averse and doesn't want to change things. And actually, there's so many processes in the prop sector, and there's so many ways, you know, new businesses are coming up with prop tech, but then you've got to push the regulators to really explain why they're not going to allow an electronic signature, or they're not going to allow e-witnessing, or they're not going to allow all of those things which would allow you to get the business done. You know, we all know that a wet ink signature is not a smart way of being sure that somebody signed something. That's why you have to have e-witnessing on key deeds, because a wet signature without anybody checking who it is who's signing it is madness to rely on. Yeah. But, you know, a lot of the time people still go, well, you know, that's the way we like to do it, and that's the way we're going to do it. But the smart people will push hard to basically use tech to make the thing work better. But you do need the regulator to be, you know, you have to keep, you know, pushing him to make sure that he goes, yeah, actually the science is good and we should let you do it. Maybe you get it trialed first, but, you know, you've got to make sure that they kind of go with you. Otherwise, they're going to hold back the sector, less profit, more cost, less efficiency, less happiness, because it's just a painful process to do it in an archaic way.
Definitely. Brilliant. And Gary, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo Rob in there. I mean, it's getting the right technology for the right solution and making sure that it's safe and viable. You know, sitting in the seat that I do now, it's my job to make sure that the technology we bring into the Connells, you know, to the Connells group, has the right security standards, has the right controls about it, can be implemented, can be supported, is generally available to the public. You know, I have to tick a lot of boxes before I can actually use a piece of technology across what is, you know, 15,000 members of staff and 1,300 offices. I mean, it's massive. So we have to make sure we get the right technology. And it's, you know, as much as you want to, you see, you know, in my role, I see loads of technology, and some of it is great. It might solve that little bit there, or that little bit there, or that bit there, but I have to look at the bigger picture. And it's remiss of me not to say, you know, you know, from a Yoti perspective, you know, when we looked at that, we looked at the bigger picture and said, well, you know, we have a staff turnover within our group, so therefore we're going to be taking on a lot of members of staff. So I personally went through an AML process when I actually joined the business. When you're actually renting or buying and know your client, we're going to go through an automated AML process. That's great. That's a right thing to do, because actually it saves significant amount of time and effort, but we've put it throughout the whole business. Is there a solution that we can do that goes right throughout our business? Same thing with the kind of e-signing. It's not just about signing a tenancy agreement. It's actually the whole process. It's a standing order, a direct debit mandate. It's actually the terms of reference, the terms of business, the inspections, the check-ins, the check-outs. I mean, imagine a scenario there where if you actually pulled all of that together into something like a formal property passport. You know, we talk about having a passport. For me, Gary Barker went over to Spain last week, or as I was saying to you, I haven't, but I bloody well will do when I can get over there.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, I know. I'm normally orange by now, but you know, imagine having a property passport which is self-linked. You know, there's your physical passport, but a property passport that you can actually. Wouldn't it be great to kind of give that gift as you either an incoming tenant or an incoming vendor? This is my property. This is the history of this property. This is everything that's about that property. And it's, you know, and okay, in a lot of cases, brand new build, okay. And in fairness, with the developers, they love it. They're actually doing this already. You probably, I don't know whether you've come across it, but a lot of the new homes developers are actually doing property passports, where they're taking the opportunity to put together the floor plan, the images, the actual land framework, and you get that you adopt to it and adapt to it, and you really quite enjoy it. And I just think that that's something that we could look to be doing as an industry, to actually create this kind of property passport. And me as Gary Barker can look through the whole history of my property passport and activity. But when I'm moving, I can simplify the process of moving, because actually it's something that's portable. And, you know, we'd certainly be kind of very interested in that.
And do you see that, kind of jumping to my sort of falling into the last question, great to get your thoughts as well, Andrew. Do you see that as a trend moving over the next 5 years, that the market's going that way? Or do you see, what else do you see kind of coming in the future, or kind of over the next 5 years? Gary, or to follow up on that, Gary.
What do I see coming in the next few years? I mean, I think there's going to be a lot more consolidation with technology. I'm going to sound really, I would hope so, because I bet my investment in Repeat on foundations. So I should see there's a collaboration of technologies, and therefore, and I don't need to tell you guys this, because clearly, I think you probably share the same vision that there's going to be a collaboration of technologies. I think there's going to be a lot more around automation of technologies. I think we're going to see a lot more around consumers expecting more from technology as well. I think when you look at the average age of a buyer and a seller within the UK at the moment, we're still, a buyer is still kind of early 40s. That has an inclination. I don't want to sound old now because I'm in there, so I'm going to talk about people that don't use technology, and I'm one of them. But their level of technology isn't maybe as high as the kind of the millennials. So let's see, there's going to be a shift with technology over the next kind of 10 to 15 years. But the consumers have adapted to it now. We do it in our, it's not just, the mobile technologies that we use isn't just in the housing. We use it for everything. It's our way of life, our banking processes, our shopping processes. How many of us ordered Deliveroo last night whilst watching the football kind of thing? We do a lot actually digitally transact. And I just think the housing market's got an opportunity here where it can actually digitally transact. It won't do all of it, but you know what? We can work with that customer more. We can understand our customer demands more. We can actually understand more about what a customer wants from their next property. Because actually, if we're building a property passport up and we're building a kind of a customer awareness, and we're talking to our customers much more, customer for life. Let's think about those kind of scenarios. How many agents look at customers for life? When you touch in excess of 1 million people a year, in the group we kind of have, well, you have a customer for life at the end of the day. So I do think that you're going to see a lot more little bite-sized pieces of technology start forming together to form full solutions. I mean, that's how I see it. But I'm sure, Andrew, you've got loads of other views here, because you obviously look at a lot of other technology as well, and you've seen a lot of good technology work as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I quickly jump back to security and compliance, because there was a lot of question around all of that. Very quickly touch on that. So the point you talked about technology, and you said, yeah, okay, can only really be used on industrial scale, if it's safe to use. And early on, one of my great sort of bugbears is stakeholders and gatekeepers and all this sort of stuff. And I'll just give him a name check, but Stuart Young is doing a huge amount of work, and I don't know how he does it, because he gets on government committees and I just want to strangle everybody. But he kind of herds everyone together and says, okay, let's have what they call a truth, a defining, this is how we're going to do stuff. And at the moment, the government is very much saying, okay, we'd like to still identify people, because of course, we're a country where we don't have an identity card. Many other countries do, and they're like, okay, this is who I am. We have a passport, we have a driving license. And the big things that are on the horizon are, proving who you are, but also who's going to be the provider of that information. Because the government is actually going to say, only certain parties are we going to authorise, being the people who can authorise who has the defining identity. I'm not really making myself clear. So at the moment, everybody has to prove who they are when they're buying a property, selling a property, and all the rest of it. And it isn't just £1 million, because if you look at, it isn't just 1 million people buying property. Landlords, tenants, there's about 4 million people a year who are doing property in one form or another. And then you look at commercial real estate as well, it's a much bigger. So, it could be up to 5 million people a year have to prove who they are, because they're going to do something relating to property, even if they're remortgaging. Now, if you think how big the population is, it's about 10%. So 10% of the population every year have to prove who they are, sometimes multiple times. And Stuart Young reckons it's probably 4 or 5 times. So why not just once? And then think how much money and time you're saving. So that's kind of one thing. But the government committees, and this will make you laugh. I witnessed one a couple of months ago, and this is where the stakeholders come in, because we're talking about digital ID, and this is a great idea. And there actually happened to be a lord in this committee, and he was saying, great. So this idea thing, I think it's a great idea. Who's going to pay for it? And I was thrown by that because he sort of asked the question. It was like, well, you know, and then he said, because I'm a landlord. So I thought even in those committee meetings, he's got a vested interest. He's probably thinking, I've got 200 properties. I've got to pay out 200 times each time, you know, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know, it bumps along, and I'm very much kind of forget all that. I mean, everybody wants to buy, sell, do stuff more quickly, and you're just wondering about who's going to pay for it. It's kind of, you know, is it going to affect me? And I'm like, well, you can't go like that. You've got to think, everyone just wants this. There's a tsunami of need of doing things quickly, which is why we've got Amazon. Separate topic then, what's happening in prop tech and all the rest of it? Yeah, there's going to be a massive amount of consolidation, as you say. Tons of money's coming into it. My daily life, I grow prop techs. I've dealt now with about 70 in the last year. And we talk about technology. I met 170 founders in 2.5 years, and I've met 130 in a year, because obviously now, you know, with video conferencing, you can do that. But I get to see what's going on, and what is really going on is the consumer, and I don't know who touched upon that earlier on, just wants things done quickly. And they don't care about everyone squabbling about how it's going to be done. They're going to go to the companies who do stuff quickly. So if you're a conveyancer and you do it quickly and efficiently, they don't care if you're more expensive. They will come to you. And, you know, they find you on the internet. They do not find you by walking down the high street. And this is the same for agents as well. You know, it's all these things sort of swirling around. But coming back to, you know, prop tech companies and all the rest of it, the way I look at it is like this. When I was younger, they used to have a program, I think it's called The Bionic Man. And I think if you can think of property, buying, selling, planning and everything, being like the Bionic Man, which is to say, bit by bit, your hand is being turned digital. All the processes, someone's looking at that and go, right, that finger moves like that. How do we break that down? How do we replicate that? I'm not talking about like a digital twin, but I'm just saying, what is that process? And someone somewhere is coding that. Some 22-year-old has got a blackboard or a whiteboard probably, and they're, you know, saying, right, that's how that finger works. And there'll be someone in China who's saying, okay, that knee, that works like that. And it will all get joined up. And I'm not talking about a CRM. I'm just talking a way of doing property. And that's what's happening. And, you know, the bigger players are looking at it, and the venture capital and this and all the rest of it, sort of saying, right, where do we put our money? And I continuously, people ring me up and they go, who should I invest in? And I said, if only I knew. It's just like the Grand National. There's 47 runners. And we're actually at the moment going to start running a top of the pops, because we just set up a publication and we're going to have the top 20. And we, you know, because it'll help people, not to say, oh, put your money in, but you can clearly see there are certain verticals where things are moving quickly because a lot of cash is coming into it because they want to get that sold. And that gets sold, and then there'll be a dominant party, and then there'll be a next sector. In rental, it'll be that. In building, it'll be that. So yeah, it's getting quicker. It's not going to stop. Everyone says, "Oh, lockdown will stop," and then all this prop tech stuff will disappear. I'm thinking, you're joking. It's going the other way because it drives cash more quickly, and capitalism loves money flowing around. I mean, if you, as an estate agent, I used to expect a check coming into my office every 14 weeks. Now, estate agents get a check in twice a year because it's 28 weeks from taking it on to getting a completion check. That's two a year. If you could speed that up and you go back to having 4 checks come through your office a year, you know, 4 transactions, think of your cash flow. And that's good. That's good for the person buying it. That's good for the person selling it. And it's certainly good for the agent. You know, so what is bad about doing things more efficiently?
Absolutely.
Nothing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really interesting. And finally, probably quite briefly, Robin, what's your views?
Sorry.
Yeah, you know,
it's brilliant.
I think there'll be more, you know, looking at the tenant market more than the sale market. I think in the next few years, I think half of people literally in 3-4 years time in the UK, particularly younger people, will have a digital ID, reusable. They'll have a tenant passport. They'll have their open banking with all of their rental payments and their salary information. they'll have some kind of star rating, which is verified by other letting agents or landlords who basically have seen them not wreck the place and, you know, have done a good job over the last 1, 2, 3 years of tenanting. And all of that pre-verified information will mean that they can be a very attractive, efficient customer for small as well as big agents. And I think actually small agents will think that makes my ability to compete actually a bit easier, because all of that admin stuff I'm not very good at, and I'm not going to have the best systems for all of that, but I'm going to let somebody else, you know, they're going to bring all of that, I'm going to get a third party to check it all and do AML, and I'm going to concentrate on making sure I've got good properties and that I can take these people round and try and close the deals. And I think in tenancy, I think we'll see quite a lot of efficiency gains there. I think until the government kind of looks harder at some of the sales process, I think there's just, it's going to take longer for some of the kind of, you know, grit in the oil to actually kind of sort itself out.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Can I finish with one comment? Because I think Andrew did a brilliant one. I love to see where Andrew goes to see developers where they have blackboards. I think that's brilliant, Andrew. I love the idea of my development team with their blackboards up. They'll love you for that. They really will. You're not gonna live that one down, Andrew.
What's a blackboard? What's a blackboard? No,
you get the chalk out.
No,
come to my office.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for those brilliant topics, conversations. Really interesting to see everyone's answers. We've got Q&A, and thank you everyone for staying on the line. We have run over our initial, what we thought would have been plenty of time, but if anyone does need to drop off, we'll keep going on the Q&A and we'll send a recording out to everyone so you won't miss anything. But let's go through these questions at a speedy pace. So first question we have, how do you think the personal agent / company agent business models will play out, and how will technology influence that? I guess, Gary, what are your thoughts on that? Maybe if we just one person answer each question, then we can get through it.
I think I touched on that a little bit. I think what we're going to see is the right technology used by the right sector of the business. You know, we've seen different models come into fruition, whether that be the online agents, whether it be the personal agents, whether it be the kind of corporate agents or the independent agents. There will be technology that aligns to the different sectors, because they will operate in different. They choose their model and they operate in the way that suits their business. You know, there is not a one size fits all, I'm afraid. You know, we know that from the industry. 51% of all UK transactions are made up by 500 businesses. And therefore, there's 12,000 other businesses that make up a very long tail, and they have different models. I don't think if anybody says there's a right size fits all, I don't think we'd believe that.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Next question. How do you foresee the planned digital trust framework impacting Yoti and other EIDV providers? I guess.
Please don't give that one to me.
That's probably one for me, Matt. I think, you know, briefly, like, you know, look, we all know that the Verify scheme didn't work as well as, you know, the government hoped it would work. And, you know, partly I think, you know, when it was first kind of planned back in, you know, whenever 2010, 2011, the technology wasn't quite there to make it a really useful thing. Chip passport reads, biometrics wasn't on the table. You know, I've had government, you know, people say to me, we just didn't realize when we built that whole concept. The new trust framework, I think they're doing a lot more to engage with the ID sector and with some of the sectors that really need heavy kind of, you know, effective regulation of ID, but it's got to be practical and work and use the technology well. So my own view is we don't quite know yet exactly how that's going to play out, but I think they've learned a lot of lessons, and I think they're going to use more technology, reusable ID, to ensure that actually, you know, UK PLC gets what it needs and the consumer gets what they need. And I think it will be more of a success because of that.
Right. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that, or do you agree with Robin?
No, I think I've said enough.
No, thank you. Next question. Having all the relevant property information up front will enable the transaction to run smoother and more efficiently. However, estate agents have never liked this because there might be something in there that might put off people viewing the property. How can we change this mindset and get the industry to adopt data up front, whether it's property logbooks or just buying legal searches earlier in the process? Andrew, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid point. You know, day one training, we used to kidnap people, put them in a car, take them to 2 terrible properties in terrible condition, take them to the third one in great condition, and they'd buy it. That wasn't always the case. But if you had a property with a pylon in the garden, you wouldn't tell them. You take them round, they'd find it, and you go, well, that's why it's on the market at 20% less. And that would be my mentality. And even when I had my own agency, my mentality was, we get paid by the vendor. The vendor may have painted their bathroom black, you know, and they might have a kitchen that is orange, and it's not very saleable. But our job is to market that and find the person who loves that, you know, and wants that. I've completely changed my mind now, because I'm now looking to buy, I don't know, I think my wife tells me 200 miles away. And it's not easy to get there because obviously you've got lockdown. So I'm completely the other way. I'd rather have forensic knowledge of a property, where it is. I like a drone to go around there and tell me what my neighbours are up to and all the rest of it. I like everything. And this idea of a, you know, digital logbook, I mean, there's a company called Ask Homey, and they're dealing with new home developers. And they're sort of saying, you know, let's have everything in a box. And I'm thinking, yes, so when that new home gets sold, I could say, right, it's 200 miles away, I know everything about it. I mean, people buy things from auction, don't they? And they don't even go and see them. But I'm getting to the point of, if you knew that there was a pylon in the garden, if you knew it had an orange kitchen, you'd quickly get to the person who actually loves an orange kitchen very, very quickly. The agent wouldn't waste their time, the vendor wouldn't waste their time, and you get one viewing. You know, and I'm not bothered about a pylon. You know, I'm going to be living there a short period of time. I own property in Spain. I'm going to be going there most of the year with a bit of luck. You know, those sort of people. So I think forensic, and this is what it comes down to, data sets. If you've got everything about the property, the agent in a way is, right, it's great, you've shown me it and all the rest of it, but I already decided I want to buy it. I just want to physically go around there. Yeah, this is great. So I think data helps us, gets the right people in the right properties, sifts us in quickly, because the last thing an agent wants, why do you want 25 viewings? Have 2 viewings from people in a position to proceed, and it's sold, and the owner wants that. They don't want to be hoovering the cat and having 27 viewings. You know, get me 2 people who can afford it, like it, have seen it from the outside. I'm going to muck me about, because this discovery thing, yeah, as you conveyance somebody, oh, there's a right of way of my back garden. You know, you find that a week before you exchange and you pull out. If they tell you day one and you actually can see it on a plan, you go, okay, that's interesting. We'll go have a few people walk over our garden. I love the house. Should we buy it? Job done. Job done, because it's up front. No one likes surprises, do they?
No, absolutely. Well, thank you. That's a great answer.
Were you surprised when your wife said she's going to move 200 miles away? Well, the truth of it is, she's saying, we can do a fixer-upper and you can live down there 5 days a week. But I'm thinking, now she's talking about Cornwall, and I'm going, well, that's more than 200 miles. She said, don't worry about it.
Yeah. We've got a couple more questions. So educating government regulators is tough at the best of times. Any tips on getting the attention of highly distractible bureaucrats, ministers and advisors? So has anyone here had to do that yet, or know any tips on how to do that? Go on, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was fortunate to sit on a couple of a number of the government initiatives, and I'll be honest with you, it's about understanding. I mean, when they understand the problem, they actually do help out with it. I mean, that they are very open to it, and I think that this kind of conception that it won't happen, I think the hardest part is them understanding what they go, what needs to be done and how it can be done, and then you get a few people that really did understand it and they tried so hard to do it. The problem is executing it in the right way, and who's going to pay for it. I mean, it often comes down to that. How can we execute these new technologies, these new solutions in a way, and who's going to ultimately pay for it? Because, it's not through a want of trying. And I think that's probably one of the things we do need to consider, that there's a lot of ideas that are coming out. There's a lot of ideas that the government want to actually adopt and bring through. But sometimes it comes down to budgetary exposure as well. And whether we like it or not, we're an industry which, kind of largely looks after itself. And that sounds a bit harsh, but that's the problem. And I'm sure that there'll be other people that sit on those committees that I used to kind of sit on, talking about the fact that, we were talking about great things that we did desperately want to do, but it's ultimately it comes to having the commercial backing to actually do it. And where does the commercial backing come from?
Great. No, very interesting. Two more questions. So following on from the discussion of how the Home Office particularly needs to get with the times, given HMLR's acceptance of Safe Harbour, FCA, HMRC, SRA and MLR's acceptance of EIDV, do you feel it would be beneficial for multiple EIDV providers to get together and approach the Home Office, point out the contradiction compared to other regulations and try to enforce change? Perfect opportunity is now so that they don't revert back to the in-person checks at the end of August.
Yeah, Matt, I think, it's actually the industry and the industry associations that have to talk to the government. I think, what we found in another sector, which was age verification, age estimation at the supermarket self-checkout, is the government isn't really going to just listen to one company that's got a bit of technology. It was only when the supermarkets basically looked at it, liked it, that they then engaged and said to the government, we want to try this. And then the government sits up. And I'm not saying whether that's the right or wrong way, but in reality, if the big players in the property sector, not just the biggest companies, but the trade associations that represent the big and the small players and have the right expertise, go and engage and give the good reasons, as Gary says, why it should be trialed, why it should be adopted, why it works better, then I think you get what you need. I think it's hard for just the ID companies to say, look, you should change this because we think the property sector could be better. I think the property sector has to be sure of that, and then the property sector pressures the government to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robin. Next question. Do you think estate agents and portals will go head to head with the likes of Zoopla and now offering an almost end-to-end solution? Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll go with that. So pre-pandemic, if you said to an agent, what do they love? I had a software engineer the other day, and he goes, these agents, because that's the other thing. There's like two different tribes. You've got these techie people who are introverts, live in their bedroom with no lights on, and you've got the extrovert agent who is out there, being Mr. and Mrs. sort of charisma, because that's the type of people they are, and that's why they don't have this commonality of language. But the so working from home, someone's just turned up in a great van outside. Sorry, what was the question?
Do you think estate agents and portals will go ahead with the likes of Zoopla Plus? Sorry, I've just been corrected. Zoopla Plus now offering an almost end-to-end solution since they have bought Yorkies.
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, you've got agents love or loathe, but like portals and CRMs, and probably use WhatsApp. Now, what's happened is, what I'm seeing is, I'm almost saying an unholy alliance. The CRMs are kind of now going to get friendly, I think, very much with, obviously, because if you think about it, who is inside all the agents? Obviously, the portals are, and obviously the CRMs are. And you've got all these people sort of saying, okay, this new technology's come along, we don't understand it, we can't test it. So are we going to build it? Some of the big boys are building it. And I think now the portals have worked out, we'll have the technology. Don't you worry about it, we'll have the technology. And then, of course, the big worry is that the general public will just interface, with the portals. Because, in America, you've got Zillow. Now, Zillow said, okay, we're going to do certain parts of the property ecosystem. And now they're saying we're doing it all. We can do the conveyancing, we're going to sell the properties, we're doing everything. We don't need agents anymore. Well, they have Zillow agents, and they've eaten everything. And everyone goes, well, this is mad. They can't do everything. But in fact, they're doing everything. But what I think everyone should take note of, and I do talk to people, obviously, from the portals all the time, as Andy Marshall said, he said, look, Andrew, we got a $2 billion valuation of our company, and our business is to look after estate agents, list their property. What we're going to do is suddenly not have that model. And that's similar with Rightmove. We make 70%. Do you know when we make 70%? We list agent stock. And interestingly, I can't say which of those said this, but they said Booming, however, is lucky because they're defining their model. Rightmove's got a model, and their model is agents are at the heart of it, and Zoopla, agents are at the heart of it, and Booming are staying agents at the heart of it. But also, they're going to look at is what's the general public now want. So I don't ever think that Rightmove or Zoopla suddenly are going to ditch the agents and do a Zillow. Don't particularly think Booming will either. Or, you know, you've got On the Market as well. They all need agents. You know, those three listed companies are based on we get money from estate agents. The day they cut their throat, they cut their own throat because that's the revenue. It's the new models that will come through. They're the ones to worry about because it might be the general public saying, I don't need an agent. I'm going to use this solution.
Brilliant. That's great.
Yeah, I think, you know, agents.
They need each other to coexist.
Yeah. Brilliant. They need the revenue. Yeah, that is their revenue model. Estate agents.
Brilliant. And final question. As employers move towards hybrid working, the appetite for people to move out of cities is likely to grow. Do you think tech can be better used to help those people assess the best places to relocate to taking into account commute, education, services, cost of living? And I'll direct this final question to Gary.
Yeah, of course I do. I mean, I think the some of the solutions that we see in the market at the moment now are around area awareness, data awareness, you know, what's happening in my area. I think when you look at the kind of, even Google, take Google's very basic essence, which is, you know, Google Street View, you know, that's the logic around that. Imagine being able to walk down a kind of Google Street View. This is the area that I'm moving into. And actually I'll add my social demographic areas to it as well. And I can understand more about the area. I've got, you know, I won't name too many companies, but obviously there's a lot of companies that have actually tracked data of what goes on in the area. What facilities there are, what leisure facilities, what commute. I mean, I can't even remember the name of the company now, but there was a wicked one I came across which had all the commute lengths in there, and it was so cool because actually I sat there and went, right, I want to live around, you know, a 30-minute commute to Milton Keynes or area. Right, that's where I want to do. And all of a sudden, the commute became quite interesting. I was like, oh, I didn't realise I could kind of live there or live there. And they're the kind of things that I think is absolutely spot on. And I think there's a lot of tech coming out there that kind of supports that. And that's funny enough, Andrew, I think that's something that Zoopla, Rightmove, Booming, should invest. They're the ones that are looking, you know, should be and probably are. In fact, I know they are looking at some of those solutions.
The portals aren't the enemy. The portals want to make money. They want the customers to be happy. They want the end customer to be happy, you know. And what's wrong about running a company that wants to make money? I think everyone who's in property should be doing that, or, you know, it's a lot of abuse because, God, you know, dealing with the general public is very difficult. Yeah. So, you know, let's look after everybody. And by doing that, what are their needs? Let's address their needs. And I think that's what the portals are doing. And I think that they can do that. You know, I think the pandemic has said we can do so much more. And they've rethought their models during lockdown. And it's great. You know, I don't think they were lazy. They just thought, oh, actually, video conferencing, everyone does that. Maybe they'll, you know, viewings. Maybe, if they can have, you know, virtual viewings, maybe they'd like that. And the general public going, oh, good, virtual viewing on a property. That's, you know, and Pandora's box is open and stuff is happening. You know, it's exciting, really.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much for all those brilliant questions from the audience. So we've come to the end. We've definitely overrun, but the great thing is we've recorded this, and thank you to everyone for staying on. I think we've got most people listening in or watching in, so really do appreciate it. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Gary, Robin and Andrew. It's been an absolutely fascinating, just over an hour now. Really appreciate your time. I know it's very precious. Just so we know, everyone knows, we will send out a recording of this to everyone who has registered. So even if you weren't able to attend today, you should be able to still watch back. Please keep an eye on LinkedIn and other social channels as we'll follow this brilliant session up with another one in our webinar panel series. Just leaves me to say thank you finally. Have a great day, and it's coming home.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Matt. Cheers, guys.